Thanks for attending. I'm going to go ahead and take over your screen here. And I'm going to record this just in case you need to refer back to anything in the future here. So you had on your Google Classroom page this document, this DBQ from 2010. And of course, you had this worksheet to fill out as well. You, of course, had way more documents than you will see in May when you take the actual AP exam. I put on the stapled method again because, again, I wanted you to fill this one out this time around. So we'll kind of get to that here in a bit of what maybe you wrote down or what you should have written down here in a little bit. And then, of course, I wanted you to put in your thesis statement, your supporting arguments in order to frame this actual question. So what we're going to start off by doing is we're going to go through the actual documents here. And again, I want you to chime in when you see an issue or you see a problem. I want you to, unmute and ask a question or at least chat using the function here, right here. So as always, you can type in a question or type in something that you want to bring up as we're going through this. But again, we're going to kind of go through the question and the documents to start off. All right, so let's say you were to get a question like this on the DBQ section of the test, which of course is the test. I got to catch myself here because this is the only thing you would see is just a question and 5 documents coming up in May. So the question, and this is, again, in 2010, this is prior to the switchover when it came to how the test was formatted, if you will. So keep that in mind moving forward, that the test is going to be formatted a little different than what we are left to work with the old DBQs, but it's still close enough that we can use these to actually understand and learn how DBQs are written and how they're scored, if you will. So the question of this one was, the issue of territorial expansion sparked considerable debate in the period of 1800 to 1855. Analyze this debate and evaluate the influence of both supporters and opponents of territorial expansion in shaping federal government policy. All right, territorial expansion, early 1800s. All right, let's turn to the stapled method first. All right, I need you to unmute your microphone and I want you to tell me, what did you come up with on some of these? So we're going to start with social. Are there any reform movements, civil rights issues, or everyday people problems that are happening in the early 1800s, from 1800 to 1855?
I might be a little early for this one, but weren't the farmers being forgotten again?
There's always going to be a group of farmers that feel they're being neglected. It just depends on what region. So in the early 1800s, what farmers are being neglected? New England farmers. They're being replaced with machines. They're being replaced with industrial, kind of industrial centers, if you will. So yeah, you're gonna have that. There's gonna be some, push to move west, if you will. So if you've got these farmers that have very small tracts of land in places like Massachusetts or Connecticut, where are they going to satisfy their need for land?
The West.
Come on, folks, where are they going?
The West? Question.
Okay, so the West. What part of the United States currently are we talking about? Early 1800s, think.
Are we talking like Ohio area, or are we talking?
Okay, so these people are going to be, and I'm currently reading a book about this. Dave McCullough wrote a book called The Pioneers, and it's about the settlement of Southern Ohio. And it all happens in the early 1800s. Remember, Ohio becomes a state in 1803. All right, we become the 17th state. So the Northwest Territory, okay, the Northwest Ordinance of 1787 made it possible for them to settle this area. And they're starting to come in the late 1700s, early 1800s. Now, in 1803, that year should sound familiar as well, because there's another large land purchase that happens that year, the Louisiana Purchase. So that Western territory is going to be settled along the Mississippi and Missouri River throughout the 1830s and 40s. Why? The Missouri Compromise happens in 1820. All right. So all of that is going to go back to what Baker said before. This is all about farming. You know, where are the farmers at? It's the Great Plains region that we've talked about before, that we got during from the Louisiana Purchase in 1803. Okay. So again, the social, definitely could be farmer versus, Eastern Coast elite, if you will. Other civil rights issues. When I bring up the Missouri Compromise, what should immediately spark to mind?
Spread of slavery.
Okay, the spread of slavery. Remember, we're talking about the southern border of Missouri being the dividing line between North versus South. So that's another thing. When you're talking about civil rights, that's going to inspire a new abolitionist movement. People like William Lloyd Garrison, people like Frederick Douglass, who are going to say, you know what, now that we're adding territory, we need to continue the Northwest Ordinance mentality, where, if you remember, the Northwest Ordinance did not allow for slavery, okay? But the Missouri Compromise did, and it put forth that line. So there's going to be a back and forth all the way through the early 1800s and what we call the antebellum that culminates in the Civil War. And it's all that social unrest from that. You can also bring up, there are reform movements for women. Women's suffragette movement gained some traction. They also have the temperance movement during that time period, trying to get rid of alcohol. All that is firmly rooted in our Western expansion movement, okay? Technological inventions, new forms of transport, new uses of devices. What might be technological during the early 1800s that would allow for settlement of the West to be an issue?
Are trains coming into play yet?
Trains are starting to become a new form of transportation in the 1830s and 40s. Yes, you could write down trains. Any other forms of technology? Folks, if we have steam power for locomotives, what do we have steam power for as well?
Steamboats.
Steamboats, okay? And like I said before, the rivers are going to be the main thing. You're talking about the Missouri, the Mississippi, and even the Ohio River are going to link the east to the west. So you've got some technological stuff. Artistic. This was a very small piece of your textbook, and I doubt any of you paid really close attention to it. But music and art from this time period is all Western themed. People in the East love the idea of the frontier. They love the picturesque landscapes. They love the mountains. People have a taste for this Western frontier, this kind of untouched wilderness mentality. So it does influence our artwork during this time period. It certainly influences how people are writing. All right. One of the writers during this time period is a guy named James Fenimore Cooper. The only work that you probably would have heard from him, aside from a litany of other titles that you may not have heard of, was you probably heard of Last of the Mohicans. He writes about this region. Now, granted, it's set during the French and Indian War, but he writes it in the 1820s. All right. So this time period is kind of like hearkening back to the good old days of this new out west, very savage area. And that's the way the people in the East looked at it, because James Fenimore Cooper was from New York, but yet he was writing books about the Northwest Territory. Okay. So again, all of that could be artistic. Political. Folks, who's the major president? Or there's really about 3 presidents you have to make sure are presidents during this time period. if we're talking about Western expansion and territory, what three presidents do we need to know?
Jackson and JQA are the two that pop into my mind.
Okay, you could on the periphery use JQA because of his Secretary of State status. Okay, but
Yeah.
keep in mind, 1803 Louisiana Purchase, that's Jefferson. Okay, Jackson moves people out west in the Trail of Tears, and he's certainly going to be very combative on the issue of Texas and annexation, which of course Tyler does later, but that puts it on the doorstep of the third president. So in reality, it's Jefferson, Jackson, and you need to remember Polk, because remember in 1846, he's going to get us involved in a war. All right, so the Mexican War is going to be Polk's he's the architect of it, if you will, to gain the Mexican cession. So all three of those presidents are going to be very vital to knowing. JQA, again, peripheral, not necessarily as president, but as a Secretary of State, is going to have a lot to do with the settlement of the West as well. Okay. Legally, Supreme Court cases, I don't expect you to remember this one, but there are Supreme Court cases that were Native Americans versus the United States government. If you remember, John Marshall and the Marshall Court said that the Cherokee Nation had legal precedent to have their territory, excuse me, in what is today Georgia. But Jackson said, let's see him, he's made his decision, let's see him enforce it. What he was basically saying is Jackson's got an army, Marshall does not, so guess who wins? And so the Trail of Tears comes in effect on the heels of that. So there are Supreme Court cases that are pitting Native Americans with the federal government, okay? Economic issues with the stock market, borrowing or spending issues in the United States. Anybody remember any economic issues from the early 1800s? Panic of 1837, folks. Panic of 1837. If you remember, that's when Jackson takes us away from the bank, because of the bank war, and his successor, Martin Van Buren, has to deal with a devaluation of not only the currency, but also land prices in the West. There was over speculation. So that is going to have a lot to do with our acquiring of Western territory. Is okay, we have it, now what do we do with it? So that's going to have an impact on the economy as well. And diplomatic foreign policy, as I just mentioned, we have the Mexican War. We have the war for Texas independence. Okay, even though we don't ever actually get involved directly, full well we were. Okay, we say we're going to stay out of it, but we don't. And as Baker just brought up, you can certainly put in place the works of JQA. JQA is instrumental in the Adams-Onis Treaty, which gets us Florida. He's instrumental in getting Oregon. He's instrumental in getting us the Monroe Doctrine, which is what we base our foreign policy on all the way through. Okay, and of course that's going to go all the way up to and through Polk and the Mexican War, where we're going to take what we want because it's the Western Hemisphere and we believe it's ours for the taking. Which, of course, what was that terminology? What's the key word that explains that the Western territory was ours because God said it was?
Monroe Doctrine?
It's not just the Monroe Doctrine. What do we call that time period? Starts with an M and a D. Manifest Destiny is correct. Okay, Manifest Destiny is correct. So good work. Of course, Osborne, I just noticed that you did it earlier with steam engines, correct? So my apologies for not checking what I told you guys to do. So of course, the stapled method helps you to kind of organize your thoughts and what was actually going on before you ever look at anything else. Okay. Now, referring back to the actual documents, Keep in mind, we are focused on two things with this question. They are asking for territorial expansion, which you know, if you're doing this correctly from your stapled method, you know 1803, Louisiana Purchase, 1820, Missouri Compromise. Then you get the Mexican Cession in 1846, which was after Texas was admitted to the Union as well. So, and you, of course, you can throw Oregon in there as well. We went from sea to shining sea for the first time under Polk's presidency, which was his dream to go from the Atlantic to the Pacific. So you certainly have the territorial expansion, but the second part of it is sparking debate, okay? And the debate does not have to just deal with slavery. So many AP students jump to that in that answer. What are they really asking about?
Should we actually try to take over states?
Okay,
Or get more
should we
territory?
actually take over territory? Is it our right? Is manifest destiny the right thing to do? And then, of course, when that debate ends up being in the affirmative, that most people are in favor of taking over territory, what's the next debate?
Where do we take over?
Okay, well, we're taking over the territory. Once we have it, what's the next logical question? If I give you something, if I give you territory, if I give you, okay, for example, let's say I walk up to you and I say, all right, I've got this extra territory. I've got 4 acres of land that I'm not using. I'm going to give it to you. It's now yours. What's your next logical question that you have to answer? You have the territory.
What are we going to do with it?
What are we going to do with it? Okay. What is the plan moving forward? It's one thing to take Oregon. What's the next step in securing it and then doing something with it? So the debate is not just, is it north or is it south? Imagine how many AP students, and think about it when you were going through this and you were going through the actual documents, how many of you immediately jumped to the idea that, okay, well, this is going to fuel the slave debate? And there's no question it does. But they're asking considerable debate in the time period. So what are we really talking about? And breaking down, you can talk about what territory we're going to go after, what we're going to do when we get it, and then finally, what are the issues that we have after that's settled and done. So after we've taken the territory and figured out what we're going to do with it, what are the underlying issues? What's going to be the long-term issue? And of course, one of the long-term issues is going to be slavery. But notice what I've done here with those 3 things. Have I not just given you 3 debates that you can talk about, which would then frame your thesis? Because isn't that what you're going to be proving? Where we went, what we did with it, and what the long-term issues and implications were of it, okay? Those 3 things can be reformatted into a thesis, all right? So, of course, then they're asking you to analyze this debate and evaluate the influence of both supporters and opponents. So part of that is when they say supporters and opponents, what's a nice way of saying, hey, these people are going to be talking about what they think? If I ask you what you think about something, what are we normally talking about there? I'm asking you for your what?
Opinion.
Opinion or point of view. And isn't that an AP point?
Yeah.
Pointing out how these people think, which helps you to not only use the documents, but point them in the direction of point of view. Okay? So when you're building your thesis, it's not just kind of giving me a laundry list of things that were debated. You're during your argument going to have to show how they were debated and using the documents to do it. All right. So that's what we have to do from 1800 to 1855. So in 1803, they're having a congressional debate in document A. In 1803, what is the background? What issue is going to be the front and center thing in 1803?
Northwest Ordinance.
You have the right idea, the wrong one.
Okay. The word's not coming to mind.
Currently a state, has New Orleans.
Louisiana Territory.
Louisiana Purchase.
Ah,
Remember when we talked about this? Was this a legal purchase? Technically, no. There's nothing in the Constitution that says the president can purchase territory. And notice here, it's all Federalist. What political party was Thomas Jefferson?
wasn't Jefferson anti-federalist?
What did we call him in 1803?
I forgot.
Come on, folks. This is stuff you need to know on the fly if you're going to write these essays. There were Federalists in there. Were what?
Were they Jeffersonian Democrats at the time?
Okay, Democratic Republicans or
Democratic.
Jeffersonian Democrats. Yes, either way. Okay? Federalists versus Democratic Republicans. So if these three are Federalists, their point of view is going to be opposed to what Jefferson's is. Remember, this is the transition from Washington and Adams and the Federalists to Democratic Republicans of Jefferson, Madison, and Monroe before the Federalists basically peter out and die. So this is the last kind of, real fight the Federalists have when it comes to national policy. James Elliott is going to say the Constitution is silent on the subject of acquisition of territory, so he's going to say Jefferson's full of garbage. Samuel Thatcher is going to say this acquisition of distant territory will involve the necessity of a considerable standing army, so justly an object of terror. Do gentlemen flatter themselves by purchasing Louisiana we are invulnerable? No, sir. Spain will still border our southern frontier. So this guy's saying, hey, look, we're going to need an army. Now that we have this territory, we're going to have to protect it. And then finally, William Plummer is going to say, admit this Western world into the Union and you destroy with a single operation the whole weight and importance of the Eastern states. So he's saying it's throwing off the sectional balance. These three are obviously opposed to the Louisiana Purchase. They do not want the Louisiana Purchase to actually occur. They don't think, A, they don't think it's constitutional from Eliot. B, they don't think it's really a good investment if you got to protect it, according to Thatcher. And C, they don't think it's a good idea to have new territory when they're still trying to figure out what to do with their current territory in the East from Plummer. So 3 different points of view, all dealing with what should we take over, that first argument. Document B is a map. And of course, according to the dots, we've got people, homes of members voting on the measure as follows. Well, what measure? They're talking about June 4th, 1812. Okay, so the declaration of war. So people that are saying affirmative and people that are saying negative. Negative are black dots. Affirmative are clear or white or whatever. Where are most of the people saying no?
Coastal and trading cities.
Okay, so New England, massively unpopular in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut, certainly throughout New York, and even partially in the mid-Atlantic states. But the vast majority of the affirmative saying we need to go to war are what we talked about in class. They're in the West and they're in the South, what would be considered the frontier in 1812. So again, it's should we go to war? This is going into that very first argument of what do we take over? We're going to go to war out here in, this area from Ohio all the way down through Kentucky, Tennessee, and Georgia. And at the end of that war, we're going to try and take this territory out here and solidify our ownership all the way up to the Mississippi River. Even though we already own it, theoretically, because of the Louisiana Purchase, we are trying to solidify that not only do we own this territory, but the British cannot come into this territory. And we're going to basically look for these lines up here through the Great Lakes to be our international border between Canada and the United States. So again, you can talk about how this area up in here would be Federalist controlled and the rest of this would be Democratic Republicans at that point. And do remember, the War of 1812 is the last gasp of the Federalists. The Federalists have the Hartford Convention, and Hartford is in Connecticut in 1814. And they basically start saying, well, if they're not going to follow our policies in Washington, D.C. down here, maybe we just need to break away and secede and become our own country to make New England break away. And again, that was seen as, certainly anti-American, certainly anti-war, and the Federalists have a hard time recovering from that and basically fall out of favor to the point where they cease becoming a political party by the end of the decade, okay? Document C, the source, Lewis Cass. Now, Lewis Cass, I don't expect you to remember Lewis Cass. He eventually is going to run for president, and he's going to run for president as a free soil, free soil Democrat. Sorry, I had to make sure I didn't say Whig. So he's going to run as a free soil Democrat later on in 1848. Lewis Cass writes in 1829, however, in his documents and proceedings relating to the formation and progress of the Board of the City of New York for the Immigration, Preservation, and Improvement of Aborigines of America. Boy, that's a lot of words. Okay. He's going to write in there, existing for 2 centuries in contact with a civilized people, the Cherokees have resisted, and successfully too, every effort to ameliorate or improve their situation or to introduce among them the most common arts of life. Their moral and their intellectual condition have been equally stationary, and in the whole circle of the existence, it would be difficult to point to a single advantage which they have derived from their acquaintance with the Europeans. All this is without a parallel in the history of the world. That it is not to be attributed to the indifference or neglect of the whites, we have already shown. There must then be an inherent difficulty arising from the institution's character and condition of the Indians themselves. Okay, so if I told you he's a Democrat in 1829, who else is a Democrat in 1829 and can actually do something about this?
Jackson.
This is a Jacksonian Democratic argument. The Indians have been around us and they haven't benefited from us at all. It must be something wrong with them. So if they don't want to adapt and they don't want to be like us, what should we do?
Get them out.
Get them out. Let's clear them out. We're going to kick them all the way out to Oklahoma, which, if you remember, isn't even on this map up here in document B. So you could actually use B and C together. If you ain't going to join us, you got to get out. So how are we going to take the territory? We're going to take it because we can. And this is the root of manifest destiny. If we can remove them, it's because God has decided he's on our side. Okay. Document D, another map. Routes of the American Indian removal. Well, D goes right along with document C. You can see the five civilized tribes that we talked about in class, the Chickasaw, the Choctaw, the Cherokee Creek, and then the Seminole down here, are sent out on the Trail of Tears to the unsettled, organized territory, Oklahoma territory, okay? And of course, they're even going to remove people up here in what is today Wisconsin, Illinois, and Iowa. They're going to move the Sauk and the Fox out as well to these territories, all right? And they even actually put them into kind of sectionalized areas. Okay, so again, they show the routes, they show the groups, and of course, they talk about ceded lands and dates of secession. And you can see they're all ceded in the early 1830s. And then, of course, American Indian reservations out here. They're showing you where they settled. Why are they giving you this? What can you use this for?
What are we doing with it?
Okay, so you can use this for what are we doing with it? What do we end up doing with this territory right in through here? what is today Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. Think economically in the 1830s. What are we using that territory for?
We use the rivers for trade, but most of the state is farm, I think.
What farm? What type?
Plantations.
Or what? What's king, folks?
Cotton.
It is cotton. We're moving them out so we can have cotton plantations. This is going to be the area where cotton is king. And of course, how can you use that? That second argument, we're moving them out so we can use their territory for a specific product. Of course, you can use it in other ways too. We've taken the Florida territory. It's not a state yet, but we're going to move the Seminoles out. And of course, notice they're on the coast here. So we may be looking to take some territory there. Now, Miami's down here, but this area up in here is going to be coastal, used for defense when it comes to naval bases, and it's going to be used for trade as well. Okay. So the removal of these natives are all for trade and for farming, and it's going to be trade and farming for white Americans. Document E. This is by far the most confusing map, and I don't know why they put it on there. I remember when the students took this, they were all absolutely furious about this. The key is the Eagle map of the United States, 1833. This is one of the dumbest things I've ever put on here, but yet once you find out why they put it on there, it is so easy and you can see it from a mile away. Anybody guess why they put this in there and what you could use this for? Keep in mind, this is United States map, 1833.
In all honesty, I thought this was another teapot-like source, in my opinion.
It's just as dumb. Anybody want to venture a guess as to why they would use this? Okay, obviously this is a map of the United States. Maine is up here. Florida is down here. Stretches all the way out to what is today Washington and Oregon up here, and all the way down through the Great Plains, whatever else.
Sea to sea.
This is manifest destiny. The American eagle is manifest destiny. If I can draw an eagle around it, then God must have said this is white man's territory.
That's so dumb.
Welcome to AP US history. Okay, I mean, why else would it put the ribs of the bird right where the Appalachian Mountains are? Why would it put the feathers up here right where all the waving, fields of grain and cotton are, or grain and corn are? And of course, the underling here is all cotton territory. And of course, where all the thinking happens is up in New England. As dumb as this is, that's what they mean by this. Our map is influenced by God. Hello, manifest destiny. Yes, it's dumb, but they'll throw curveballs like this at you. So just be prepared. As dumb as that is, that's the kind of stuff they're looking for. Document F, Thomas Hart Benton's speech to the United States Senate, 1844. The settlers in Oregon will also recover and open for us the North American road to India. This road lies through the South Pass in the mouth of the Oregon. And as soon as the settlements are made, our portion of the North American continent will immediately commence its Asiatic trade on this new and national route. So Thomas Hart Benton telling us the importance of Oregon in 1844. First of all, what president's going to get it done? Not all at once, folks. What president's going to get it done?
Polk.
Polk. It happens during Polk's presidency. Again, this is why timelines are so important. Okay. Ben's talking about the importance of getting Oregon. Not surprisingly, the winner of the 1844 election, Polk, is going to get it done. Polk is going to push for this. Okay. And when we're talking about Asiatic trade, this is going right into that second argument. What are we going to do with it? We're taking the territory, and keep in mind how ridiculous that is. If you're looking at the map, if Oregon's way the heck out here, we're trying to take this territory way out here on the feathers, you know, the very tips of the wings, if you will. Have we even settled any of this territory in here? We've taken it, but have we settled it?
No.
Not really. This is the idea that Benton has, who, by the way, Benton is from Missouri. Okay, I don't expect you to remember that or know that, but he's from Missouri. There is nothing between Missouri and Oregon. However, there is something that goes up through here and was very important to Missouri. Anybody remember what it was called, going from here to here? Video game?
Trail to Oregon.
You died of dysentery along the way? It's Oregon Trail. The Oregon Trail, Benton is viewing this idea that if we can get out to Oregon and we can set up trade routes between Missouri and Oregon, Oregon can then set up trade routes across the Pacific to trade with Japan and China, and then those materials can come all the way back and go through Missouri. So even back then, you had people like Thomas Hart Benton that were only worried about their own home state and their economic validity, if you will. So this is very much a self-serving speech, but it goes right in line with Jacksonian Democrats and Polk. So this push to go out west, Polk's the one that embraces it in 1844, and because Henry Clay does not, Polk becomes president of the United States. Document G, letter from Andrew Jackson to Moses Dawson, published in Niles National Register, 1844. Okay, so Jackson, who is no longer president at this point, is going to be writing this. If there be patriotism in the effort to increase the wealth and happiness of all classes in our society, to diffuse the blessings of equal laws and just government, if there be love in the spirit which finds in this free land of ours the means to spread the light of gospel and to teach fallen men throughout the world how he may recover his right to civil and religious liberty, it seems to me that all this patriotism, all this philanthropy, all this religion appeals to us in favor of the addition of Texas to our union. What is Jackson saying?
Admit Texas.
Let's take it. And he's going even further than that. It's our duty. It's not just patriotism, it's philanthropy. What does philanthropy mean?
Spreading wealth because you have it, I think.
Spreading the wealth, yeah. You remember Carnegie said that in the late 1800s. He was a philanthropist. Sharing wealth. This is a worthy cause because we are spreading the light of the gospel. What's funny is that Mexico owned Texas and they were Roman Catholic. So in this case, he was taking it for the Protestant faith. Of course, if you paid attention to your founding documents, are we supposed to promote our religious beliefs when we make a political decision?
No,
Separation
of church
Jackson
and state.
does it anyway. Now, keep in mind, again, this is after Jackson is president, but this is certainly going to be in line more with James K. Polk than it will be with Henry Clay. And this is an election year, and Polk is his protege, so Jackson is setting the table for Polk to be president of the United States. Document H, source, John C. Calhoun, address to Congress on Mexico, 1848. Remember, Calhoun is a senator from South Carolina. He was a vice president under Jackson, did not like Jackson. Jackson wanted to hang him because of tariffs. Well, in 1848, he's going to be talking about this new section of territory they just got from the Mexican War. He says, we are anxious to force free government on all, and I see that it has been urged in a very respectable quarter that it is the mission of this country to spread civil and religious liberty all over the world, and especially over the continent. It is a great mistake. None but people advanced to a very high state of intellectual improvement are capable, in a civilized state, of maintaining free government, and amongst those who are so purified, very few indeed, have the good fortune of forming a constitution capable of endurance. Okay. Aren't smart enough to do it. That is basically what John C. Calhoun is saying. He is saying Mexico can't function because they do not have purified, moral, intellectual leadership. We, on the other hand, do. Now, of course, it's pretty self-serving because John C. Calhoun is himself one of those leaders. But let's be honest, it also has racial overtones as well. We take the territory because we are more civilized. We, what he means by that, white America. He's not talking about the slaves of the South. He's not talking about the Native Americans. He's talking about white people take it because these people are not Caucasian. These people are Latino. So therefore, they cannot have the civil, religious, and moral or intellectual capacity to run this territory. So when it comes to Mexican cession, not only are we taking it because we can, we're taking it because we have to, which again is right in line with what Jackson was talking about. The government itself, the only model, which is only the mode which the people have chosen to execute their will, is equally liable to be abused and perverted before the people can act through it. Witness the present Mexican War, the work of comparatively a few individuals using the standing government as their tool, for in the outset the people would not have consented to this measure. Anybody got an idea of what's the right?
The government wanted the Mexican War, not the people.
Yeah, Calhoun's full of garbage. We can run ourselves, but our leaders chose to lead in their own way as opposed to the will of the people. So what does it bring question about? It brings question about whether or not our democracy is truly a moral leadership as Calhoun is claiming. What he's really talking about is, hey, sometimes our leadership doesn't lead correctly and they don't follow the will of the people. And finally, document J, the men of 1854, by every law, human and divine, we shall be justified in wresting Cuba from Spain if we possess the power. And this upon the same principle that would justify an individual in tearing down the burning house of his neighbor, if there were no other means of preventing the flames from destroying his own home. Under such circumstances, we ought neither to count or the cost nor regard to take Cuba from Spain at that point. We had taken, Texas from Mexico. We had taken California from Mexico by this point. Now, this manifesto from Congress they could use, or a military base that they could use to the United States, or to at least have war against. Saying we just need to take it. In reality, argument they have with the addition, what is today California, Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, and parts of Utah. Territory. What were the real issue with adding that? Arizona, New Mexico, and Nevada. Do we not remember our middle school geography?
I'm kind of lost. You were cutting out on my end.
Okay. So can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So the question here, when it comes to this DQ, the Austin Manifesto is basically saying we need to take Cuba. We had already taken territory in the Mexican cession, but that was California, Arizona, New Mexico, parts of Utah, and part of what is today Nevada. If those territories were taken, we would say that that is north, east, south, west, or one of the other directions.
Mostly south.
Okay, so if they're mostly south, what issue is going to come up?
Slavery expansion.
There's your expansion of slavery, your third argument. Austin Manifesto in 1854 is saying not only should we take that territory, we should take Cuba because we've already taken Oregon, we've already taken Washington, we've already taken Montana. Those are northern territories. They're going to be free states. So we have to equal out what is slave. And keep in mind, Cuba under Spanish rule had slavery. So taking Cuba would have just taken another slave territory. So the Austin Manifesto is going against, and this, again, we're going to come back to this, but DBQs always give you points for getting outside information. Well, if they're saying that this one is saying we should take more territory to be slave, was there a document somewhere in this time period that said of the territory we took, it should be free?
It was something to do with the Mexican secession because Mexico didn't have slavery.
Yes. Yes. It was a senator from Pennsylvania. Anybody remember this one? Feel free to use the chat. Guy wrote in 1848, I believe, that it's great that we took this territory. It's awesome that we have it. I'm so proud of us for winning the war. We got this land from Mexico. However, the new land from Mexico, considering they did not allow slavery in Mexico, then by extension, this new territory should also be free as well. So even if I just do a quick anybody got anything now? There we go. All right, David Wilmot. Hassan's on it. There we go. The Wilmot Proviso. Remember, it said, yep, we took this territory, and it's fantastic. We've got this territory, but it's going to be free soil, which is, it inspires the free soil movement, which inspires the Whigs, basically over time, to start falling apart, and then the Republican Party to form in its ashes, because the Republican Party is basically old Whigs, old the nativist party called the American Party or the Know Nothing Party, and then Free Soilers to all come together. That's why when Lincoln gets elected in 1860, there are a number of people in the South that say, oh, he's just a Free Soiler. He's one of those people. Now, Wilmot, of course, was not a Free Soiler in his own right. He just didn't want African Americans to come to Pennsylvania. He wanted it to be free territory in the West, so they'd go there. Okay, so don't think he's some magnanimous person who wanted the rights for all. That's not really the case. But again, Wilmot's proviso, you can use that as outside information to go against the Austin Manifesto. Okay, again, all these documents are trying to help you to answer the initial question about debates. You should also have your background info that you can also use for your outside information and for your point that frames the argument. Remember, historical context is important, okay? And then, of course, you would have your thesis and your 3 supporting arguments, and I kind of walked you through that anyway. At this point, are there any questions? Again, you can unmute your mic and ask, or you can chat. Questions, comments, concerns so far? All right, so I've lost some people along the way. Sure, I've bored people to death there, and my apologies. Okay, so I'm going to take this off. All right. So I've already walked you through how to answer the question. I've walked you through the different documents, and I've walked you through the stapled outside information. You don't have to use that methodology when you actually take the exam. I can't stress that enough. You have to do what feels good to you. Some people make a timeline real quick from that time period because they're really good with that. Other people just try and remember, all right, well, what president was there during that time period? And they go off of that because they can remember a lot more about presidents than they can about anything else. Other people just say, you know what, I'm just going to start writing and hopefully it all makes sense at the end. Whatever the case may be, you've got to find the system that works best for you. And of course, your 5 steps to a 5 also lay out a number of different methodologies going after the DBQ. I cannot stress this enough. Your exam coming up in May in just a few short weeks is only a DBQ, and it's a shortened one. In looking at your practice exams, okay, and I put those in today so you can look on Progress Book to see how you did. Some of you did very, very well. Others of you struggled, and that's okay. Remember, you took that before we started doing any of this focus in on how to review, how to get, how to attack a DBQ, how to attack an LEQ, which you don't even have to do anymore. And of course, the short answers for many of you, that was actually your kryptonite. You don't need to do that. The good news is the one that most of you scored the best on was the DBQ. And there's no multiple choice, which some of you got sunk by the multiple choice. So if anything, this newer version, this online version, is probably going to work out better for you. Especially because your writing is 10 times better. Keep in mind, what's the one thing you have to do on whether it's a DBQ, LEQ, whatever, what's the one thing you have to do to start off? It's your thesis. So what I'm going to ask you to do, when you hand this one in, what I'm going to ask you to do is formulate your own thesis. I'm not going to walk you through that part. I want you to work on that. That's the part of the assignment that I want you to have done and turned in by tomorrow. Okay? Show me that you can take what we've done and create a thesis with your supporting arguments. That's going to be the part I review the most in your submissions tomorrow. Also tomorrow, you're going to get your third DBQ. Again, I'm going to ask you to fill it out. I'm going to give you a different methodology of how to do background information. Okay, so no stapled method this time. It's going to be a different version. I'm going to put it on there and explain it. And I'm going to give you another DBQ from way back. So it's going to have way more documents because you really just need the practice of finding what the documents are and how to use them. So don't get overwhelmed at this point. We're still early in this process. I would really need you to log on during office hours and ask questions if you need one-on-one help. Please do that, especially if you're one of the people out there, you're like, man, I feel like I could have done better on the practice AP exam, but my writing needs help. Log on, we'll talk, okay? There's no judgments here, guys. You're the superheroes right now. You're taking the exam during this crazy time of online schoolwork. So I get it. I understand how frustrating it can be. What I really need you guys to do at this point is kind of focus in on your DBQs, because you're going to take this come May 15th. By that point, by my calculation, I will be able to get you, I'm averaging these every 3 days, up to DBQ number 6. So there'll be 6 of these. And then we're going to have an entire week of just plain old review where we talk about how to review, and then more importantly, what to review moving forward. Okay. So again, our main focus at this point is just getting you ready for that one written assignment that you have to do. Now, one thing that was brought up in a meeting that I just got out of at 1 is that the AP board is trying to reach out to you through the email that you used on AP Classroom. So when you guys registered for the AP exam, you used a email address. Please make sure you're getting AP College Board emails, that you're getting those, because that's how they're going to get you the link that you need to use in order to get in and actually do the actual AP exam. And forgive me for a second, I'm going to try and find the email that they, okay. So I'm going to bring this over real quick, and I'm going to take over your computers one more time. And then it allows me to view students' information. Okay, this is what they were basically saying is, hey, we've come up with this new system and we want you to check on your students. Now, if I check on my students here, anytime, come on, AP. Of my 17 students, look, all people listed here are unknown. We're not sure if you're taking the exam or not, okay? However, students have said, these are the 5 right here. Some of you are on the call, that you've got that email and you have answered in the affirmative that, yes, I am taking the exam. Now, if you're one of the people listed down here, I need you to log in and do that. I need you to find that email. If you're not getting that email, check your spam, check your trash. If you used a personal email, definitely check your spam, because this might have been deposited into that spam box. But I need you to do that, because this, again, is how the AP board is going to reach out to you to give you your link in order to take the exam. Now, I'm going to need to enlist your help here. If any of you talk to Courtney, talk to Daniel, talk to Morgan, I need to know what their plans are for this exam. Okay, I need them to contact me and let me know what their plans are moving forward when it comes to taking the AP exam. Those are the only 3 I haven't heard from, and I haven't heard from Daniel at all, period. So if anybody knows where this young man has moseyed on off to, please get in contact with him and let him know I'm desperately trying to talk with him. So get off the presentation. There we go. All right. So again, do realize right now we have the exam coming up in just a few short weeks. Okay, but that doesn't mean we can't get a lot done and we can't get a lot covered. A reminder again, it's just units 1 through 7, and I have a strong feeling the question is probably going to come from the 1800s sometime. So, just kind of keep in mind what we just went over might be the topic of the actual exam, because I have a feeling they're going to try and place it right in the dead center, which would put it, at least year-wise, around the time of the Civil War. Okay, so please kind of focus in on that. That's at least my best guess as to when that's going to, what time frame is going to be asked. I could be totally wrong. They could ask about World War I, and then we're sitting there yelling at V here in a few weeks. But we'll go over it. We'll have review sessions leading up to it. I'm not going to leave you in the dark here. So, are there any questions? Okay, it's been an hour. I've wasted an hour of your life here. Go Go ahead.
What email would College Board use to get a hold of me? Because I'm not able, because I just did a quick search for it and I wasn't able to find it.
Which one did you sign up with?
I
Did you
used
use
my
the
personal
Source
one. I'm asking what email they would send. I would receive an email from.
It should, theoretically, it should come from the Advanced Placement Program. So you would search this, or you would search College Board at ecollegeboard.org. Just search the word College Board. That's where you would be receiving these from.
All right, because I looked that up and I got the schedule released, but I did not get anything that says answer whether or not you're testing or not.
Okay. So here's what I'm going to need you to do. I'm going to need you to log into your AP Classroom. Okay. So when you go to College Board, you know, AP, what is it called? It'll come to me here. apcentral.collegeboard.org. When you go to apcentral.collegeboard.org, there will be a link for student, and you will merely log in and see which one they have on there for you. You can also email somebody through College Board to request them to resend the email to a different email address. We've been having this as a common problem across the board. Flickinger was talking about it. Taylor was talking about it. Ficker was talking about it. So all of us are having the same issue. So again, if you have access to email, your name is on this list right here, please log in and set the AP exam, okay? If you have questions about that, the probably quickest route, if you're not getting anywhere with the College Board, is to email Ms. Summers. It's bsummers@nwlsd.org. She will get in there and fix it. She's kind of our AP test coordinator. So if you have questions about that part of it, contact her. And of course, she's the one, a number of you had reached out and said, hey, I'm having trouble paying for these things. She's the one to contact if you're having issues with that.
All right.
All right, folks, if you have any other questions, concerns, you can hang back. Otherwise, I'm going to stop recording now